Some childhood memories cling to you like shadows, following you no matter how much you try to outgrow them. Some memories are harmless, even sweet, but others carve themselves into your bones so deeply that no amount of time will ever erase them. This is one of those memories, one I will never, ever forget. It happened during the summer of 2013, when I was just 10 years old, innocent, wide-eyed, and completely unaware that real fear could live outside of movies and nightmares. My parents had decided to get away from the city for a few days, to escape the noise, the rush, the endless buzz of Denver life. They booked a small Airbnb cabin in Estes Park, Colorado, a little wooden house tucked away at the very edge of Rocky Mountain National Park. It sounded like paradise. Hiking trails, fresh mountain air, late-night campfires. We were excited, restless, full of big plans and even bigger smiles. We arrived late in the afternoon, the sun already dipping low behind the tall pines that surrounded the gravel road leading to the cabin. The place was old. You could tell from the creaky porch boards and the peeling paint, but it had a quiet charm. There was something cozy about it, something that made you imagine warm nights and crackling fireplaces. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds settling down for night. After unpacking quickly, I darted around the property, my soccer ball tucked under my arm, eager to explore. There wasn't much, just a clearing surrounded by thick woods that pressed up close on every side. But it felt like an entire world to me. That first night was everything we hoped it would be. We grilled burgers on the fire pit behind the house. We made s'mores, laughing and burning the marshmallows on purpose. We talked about the hikes we'd go on, the animals we might see. The sky above us was enormous, black velvet studded with endless stars. I remember feeling small and safe all at once. We went to bed early, tired from the day, but eager for the next morning's adventures. The next day was magic. We woke with the sun, bundled into warm jackets, and headed out to a trail called Bear Lake. My dad told stories of his own childhood hikes, of how he'd once seen a bear cub from a distance and thought it was a dog. My mom showed me how to spot deer tracks in the dirt, pointing out the delicate twin hoof prints with a teacher's patient hand. It was one of those days that feels stitched together with golden thread, perfect from start to finish. By the time we returned to the cabin, our legs ached pleasantly, and our stomachs grumbled for dinner. My mom made spaghetti while my dad and I sorted through the dusty old DVDs the owners had left behind. We settled in, plates on our laps, watching a worn copy of an old comedy movie as rain started to patter softly against the windows. Everything was perfect. Everything was normal. Until the second night, until the fear found us. It was sometime around 2 a.m. when I woke up, the cabin wrapped in thick darkness. Only a small nightlight buzzed faintly in the hallway, casting a weak halo against the wooden floors. I had to use the bathroom, so I slid quietly out of bed, careful not to wake my parents. The cabin creaked under my small feet as I tiptoed toward the hallway. Halfway there, something made me pause. A feeling, a prickling at the back of my neck. I turned my head just a small instinctive glance toward the hallway window, and that's when I saw him. Standing barely 10 feet away, near the front porch, was a man wearing a mask. The mask was stark white, eerily blank except for 2 wide, black, empty holes where the eyes should have been. He didn't move, not even the smallest twitch. He just stood there, body rigid, facing the cabin, facing me. For a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I thought maybe it was a nightmare. Maybe my imagination playing tricks on me in the shadows. But then, slowly, horribly, he tilted his head to the side, as if he knew I was looking right at him, as if he was studying me through those empty, hollow eyes. My heart hammered so loudly that I thought it might explode. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but my legs felt welded to the floor and no sound would leave my throat. I stood there, frozen in terror, locked in a silent, breathless standoff with the thing outside the window. After what felt like an eternity, adrenaline finally tore through my fear. I bolted, feet pounding down the hallway, bursting into my parents' bedroom with a cry, caught somewhere between a scream and a sob. They jolted awake instantly, disoriented and alarmed. I stammered through my tears, telling them about the man, about the mask, about how he had stared right at me. Without hesitation, my dad grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand and rushed to the living room window. My mom wrapped her arms around me, murmuring soothing words, though her voice shook with fear too. My dad peered outside. Nothing. No man. No figure. He opened the front door and swept the beam of the flashlight across the clearing. Just trees. Just darkness. Just the restless hum of the night. They tried to convince me it had been a bad dream. Tried to tuck me between them in bed and whispered away. And though exhaustion eventually pulled me into a restless sleep, I knew what I had seen. I knew it had been real. The next morning, as the pale light of dawn seeped through the cabin, my dad checked the property more carefully. Near the window where I had stood, he found them. Footprints. Deep, clear prints pressed into the soft dirt. He didn't say much, but his face tightened, and I caught him whispering urgently to my mom when they thought I wasn't listening. The rest of the day, we tried to pretend it was fine. We drove around Estes Park, ate greasy burgers in town, wandered small shops filled with trinkets and overpriced t-shirts. But underneath it all, the fear throbbed, quiet and constant, like a bruise you can't see but feel with every step. That night, dread settled into my bones. I lay awake longer, staring at the slatted ceiling beams, willing myself not to look at the window. At some point, sleep took me. But around 2 a.m., I was ripped awake again. This time not by my own body, but by a sound. A soft, deliberate tapping, coming from the living room window. That night burned itself deep into my memory, carved into my mind like letters scorched into wood. It was a memory I would carry for the rest of my life, a shadow that stretched far beyond that lonely cabin in the woods. As we left Estes Park behind, driving in the heavy silence of early morning, no one spoke. Not a word. The car rolled steadily through the misty dawn, tires whispering over the slick asphalt. In the rearview mirror, the mountains faded into gray mist, swallowed by distance, but the fear stayed with us, thick and suffocating. We eventually reached a small motel just outside Boulder. It was one of those tired places with flickering neon vacancy sign and cracked asphalt parking lots stained with oil and old rain. A place that looked like it held 100 other travelers' forgotten fears. We stayed there until sunrise. None of us slept. None of us even pretended to. At one point, I overheard my parents arguing in low, fierce whispers. Should they call the police? But in the end, they chose not to. Maybe they were too scared. Maybe they thought no one would believe the story of a masked man appearing from the darkness without reason or trace. Maybe they simply wanted to pretend it hadn't happened, that pretending could make it disappear. Either way, the decision was made in silence. The next morning, we packed up and returned to Denver. Quietly, as if speaking about it would somehow invite it back. We left the masked man behind us. Or at least, we told ourselves we had. Years passed, but that night never faded from my mind. If anything, the memory grew sharper, a blade hidden just beneath the surface of my normal life. Whenever we drove past lonely stretches of forest, my stomach would knot with invisible dread. Every time we stayed somewhere unfamiliar, a hotel, a rented cabin, I found myself compulsively checking the windows after dark, expecting, half dreading, to see that same white mask staring silently back at me from the shadows. Sometimes I wonder who he was. Was it a cruel prank by some twisted stranger? Was he dangerous? Was he waiting for something? Or someone? We never found out. And honestly, a part of me hopes we never do. Because since that night, no matter how safe my world looks on the outside, a part of me remains convinced. Sometimes, out there in the darkness beyond the warm lights of home, someone or something might be standing still, watching, waiting, before we dive into the next story. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with more true scary stories. If you enjoy these spine-chilling tales, please share it with your friends and family. Your support truly means the world to us. Thank you for being part of our community. Now, Let's step into the next nightmare. It was June 2014 when grief drove me to seek escape once again. 6 months earlier, my husband Mark had traveled to Johannesburg, South Africa, for a short-term work contract. It was supposed to be temporary, a simple job, safe. But one night, on his way home from picking up groceries, everything changed. A robbery gone wrong. A single phone call from the U.S. consulate. And just like that, my world collapsed around me. Since that night, my 7-year-old daughter Leah had been struggling with the same recurring nightmare. Her dad, standing far away on a dark, empty road, waving to her, and then slowly fading into the blinding glare of oncoming headlights. I wasn't coping much better. Bills piled up. Grief counseling sessions blurred together into endless exhausting afternoons. Every corner of our house whispered memories I wasn't strong enough to face. That's when I decided we needed a break. Not just a vacation, an escape, a place to breathe. I found a 2-bedroom log cabin listed on Airbnb, just outside Libby, Montana, near the sprawling Kootenai National Forest. The listing promised fresh mountain air, no nearby neighbors, and something else that felt like a balm to my soul. Silence. Real, honest silence. We flew from Denver to Spokane, rented a battered Subaru, and drove north under skies so brilliantly blue they looked almost fake. As we crossed into Montana, my cell service disappeared. First one bar gone, then the next, until only empty signal icons remained. It felt unsettling, but also strangely freeing, like stepping off the grid and into a place time forgot. The gravel road to cabin wound narrowly between towering pines. Walls of green closing around us, blocking out everything but the hum of tires crunching gravel and the soft whisper of wind in the trees. Leah pressed her nose to the window, watching a silver creek flash between the trees. "Do you think deer live here, Mama?" she asked, her voice soft but hopeful. "I think so." I smiled, and she beamed, a fragile, flickering smile I hadn't seen in weeks. The cabin itself sat in a clearing above the creek. Old, charming in a slightly crooked, forgotten way. A faded swing set stood off to one side, its paint peeling and its chains creaking in the breeze. A neat pile of split firewood rested against the porch. A hand-painted sign on the door read, "Welcome guests. Mi casa, su casa." I found the key in the lockbox and let us inside. Everything was exactly as pictured. Knotted pine walls, a basic kitchen, 2 small bedrooms with simple quilts, and a stone fireplace with a half-burned log still resting inside. On the coffee table sat a binder containing the usual rental house rules. Tucked inside was a single page introducing the owner, Cliff Hansen, a retired carpenter, local since 1978. It mentioned that he lived 2 ridges over and might occasionally stop by to check on the wood stove. That evening, Leah and I roasted hot dogs in a cast iron pan and ate them on the porch as the sky turned a deep, bruised purple. There were no other lights, no other voices, only the hum of insects and the soft rush of the creek below. Later, we built a small fire inside and read Charlotte's Web together. I waited for the grief to creep in, the way it usually did after dark. But somehow, the quiet felt different here, gentler, almost healing. When Leah finally drifted asleep, I stayed up watching the fire crackle. At 10:06 p.m., I scrawled a note in my journal. Maybe this is the first night I don't cry. The second day passed uneventfully. We hiked down to the creek, threw stones into the glistening water, and shared peanut butter sandwiches under a sky thick with gathering clouds. When the first low rumbles of thunder echoed through the trees, we headed back to cabin, laughing and racing the rain. It was around 6 o'clock when I ran Leah a warm bath. Steam fogged the mirror as she played with a plastic boat we'd found under the sink. I had just wrapped her in a towel, laughing at her protests, when I heard it, the front door opening, the heavy thunk of boots on the wooden floor, and then a man's voice calling out, "Hello." I wrote a quick note on the cabin's little kitchen counter. "Emergency family matter. Had to leave early." The words looked shaky under my hand, but there was no time to make it perfect. I packed in under 10 minutes, throwing clothes into bags without folding, yanking Leah's rain boots off the porch. She could sense the urgency radiating from me. Maybe she didn't understand why, but she didn't argue. Not once. By 8 a.m., the Subaru was loaded, bumping and skidding down the gravel road as I kept glancing nervously in the rearview mirror. The cabin shrank behind us, swallowed by the thick pines and the rising mist. But just as the road climbed a gentle rise, I caught a glimpse of it one last time through the trees. And what I saw sent a bolt of ice through my veins. A pickup truck, dark green, old, battered, sat in the clearing. Two men stood by the porch. One wore a baseball cap and a jacket the color of dried clay. The other, tall, with a familiar build and a silver beard. They turned, both of them, as my car crested the hill, as if they were waiting for something. Or someone. I didn't even think. My foot slammed down on the gas, and the Subaru fishtailed on the wet gravel before it caught traction again. I didn't slow, not even when the tires kicked up stones behind us like gunshots. I didn't breathe until we reached Highway 2, where my phone screen flickered weakly to life with a single bar of service. At a gas station in Libby, while Leah quietly nibbled a chocolate-glazed donut, I called my sister, the first familiar voice I had heard in what felt like a lifetime. I reported the listing to Airbnb before we even left the parking lot. I watched the signal bars climb higher on my phone as we sped east, away from the forest, away from the cabin, away from whatever was waiting there. By that afternoon, we were on a flight bound back for Denver. Hearts racing, bags still half unpacked, but safe. Airbnb refunded the remainder of our stay. They suspended the listing, but they couldn't answer the real question. Who were those men? And what were they planning to do if we hadn't left? I reported it to the local police in Lincoln County. A deputy promised they would go check it out, but I never heard back. Not once. Not a call. Not a follow-up. Sometimes, late at night, I still picture that canvas duffel bag sitting ominously on the couch. I think about what might have been inside. Rope? Tools? Something worse? Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. The truth is, it doesn't matter. A stranger crossing your threshold without permission is enough. Enough to change you. Enough to haunt you. Enough to remind you how fragile safety truly is. Since that night, Leah and I have changed the way we travel. No more isolated cabins. No more charming, rustic retreats miles away from help. Only hotels now. Hotels with desk clerks, security cameras, other people a wall away. Safety by proximity. Safety by design. Last week, Leah asked if we could visit Glacier National Park someday. The old excitement back in her voice. The hope. I smiled. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes either. Maybe, I told her, but we'll stay in town, close to the sheriff's office, with good cell service. And she nodded, understanding more than her 7 years should allow. For now, home feels safest. The walls are close. The doors are solid. And at night, when the house feels too quiet, I light a candle for Mark. I hold my daughter close. And I remind myself, leaving that cabin was the best decision I made since the worst day of my life. But peace doesn't last forever. It was August 2023 when it happened again. When I learned that sometimes, even when you think you've taken every precaution, you can never be completely safe. After a brutal stretch of my office job in Seattle, endless overtime, harsh deadlines, I needed a break. Desperately. So I booked another Airbnb. This time near Lake Quinault, tucked inside Olympic National Forest in Washington State. It looked perfect on paper. A cozy one-story log cabin, metal roof gleaming under tall cedars, 2 small bedrooms, a wide living room window facing the water. A narrow deck wound around the back. A stone path led to a tiny dock jutting into the lake. Even my wife, April, was excited, eager to trade traffic and stress for the hush of the wilderness. We packed our hatchback, drove Highway 101 until our phone showed one lonely bar service, and arrived at the cabin just before dusk. It was everything we had hoped for, and for a while, it was perfect. The days slipped by like honey. We hiked the mossy Quinault Loop, catching glimpses of ospreys diving into the water. We fished off the dock and grilled the trout with lemon and salt. We sat on the porch watching loons cry across the misty lake. Riders on mountain bikes occasionally passed by the distant trail. Silent figures moving through the trees, but otherwise, it felt like we were alone in our own private paradise. By Friday night, the knot in my shoulders had finally started to loosen. That night around 10 p.m., April and I stretched out on the couch, watching an old sitcom DVD, the rain tapping a gentle rhythm against the roof. Then came the knock. 3 polite, deliberate taps on the front door. It startled us, because we hadn't heard a car pull up. No crunch of tires. No footsteps on gravel. Nothing. I muted the TV, grabbed a heavy flashlight the host left by the firewood rack, and cracked open the door. A young man stood there, holding a mud-splattered mountain bike by the handlebars. A thin headlamp circled his helmet. His shins were streaked with dirt. "Sorry to bother you folks," he said, slightly breathless. "I'm Ethan. Came up from Portland to ride Colonel Bob Trail, but my phone died. Didn't realize how fast it gets dark out here. The descent's rough. Don't feel safe doing it at night. Any chance I could crash on your porch until daylight?" My gut reaction was hesitation. The cabin rules had specifically said no unregistered overnight guests. But April touched my arm gently. "There's room inside," she said. "It's raining harder now. Let's not leave him out there." I hesitated a second longer, then stepped back and opened the door. "I request you to please like my video and subscribe my channel, and give your remarks in comment section. It will motivate me to give you best true stories."